I recently learned I got name-checked by Terrance Howard on his recent appearance on Joe Rogan.
Neil deGrasse Tyson, with his extensive background in astrophysics and his role as a science educator, approaches Howard's theories with both skepticism and a spirit of open-mindedness.
The platform to be accepted for the ideas is not social media. It is not Joe Rogan.
Tyson might begin by appreciating Howard's curiosity and enthusiasm for science. He recognizes that public figures like Howard, who engage with scientific ideas, can inspire a broader audience to take an interest in subjects that they might otherwise find intimidating or inaccessible.
It's not about feelings here. It's about objective reality. I perform an experiment and no one else can duplicate that experiment. It belongs in the trash heap.
However, Tyson also underscores the importance of rigorous testing and empirical evidence in the validation of scientific theories.
I reached out to Neil deGrasse Tyson. I saw him at an event up front, at Fox. And he was like, hey, man, yeah, I'd love for you to come on my show, do my radio, do my TV thing. I would love that. I was like, yeah, but I've got something I want to introduce to you.
I got name-checked because 8 years ago, he sent me a 36-page treatise.
And it was only 36 pages. It was a treatise.
This is Terrance Howard attempting to reinvent mathematics and physics.
And I told him it was controversial, and I sent him over the 36-page thing that had the wave conjugations in it, but I started it off with 1 × 1 = 2.
He explains that while novel ideas and fresh perspectives are valuable, they must be subjected to the same scrutiny and validation processes as any other scientific hypothesis.
I took initial interest in Terrance because my mother said to me, do you know Terrance Howard? I said, yeah, I know. You mean the actor? She said, yeah. Well, I heard him interviewed on NPR. On there, he said that when he was a kid, he wanted to be like a scientist and study the universe. I said, well, that's cool. Okay, maybe we'll get him on Star Talk. We love talking to celebrities who have a soft geek underbelly. At the time, I didn't quite know how to get in touch with him, but we met at something called the Upfronts, which is where networks present their next season's TV shows. And then this came in my inbox. In this particular case, since I basically solicited it from him, I actually spent time reading every line of all 36 pages. And I commented. So I spent a lot of time on it.
And he went in on my treatise, wrote, redlined everything.
And I thought, out of respect for him, what I should do is give him my most informed critical analysis that I can. In my field, we call that a peer review. You come up with an idea, you present it either at a conference or you first write it up and you send it to your colleagues. It is their duty to alert you of things about your ideas that are either misguided or wrong, or there's the calculation that doesn't work out, or the logic doesn't comport. That's their job. Not all ideas will turn out to be correct. Most won't be. But to get to that point, you need to know things like, what has everyone else said about this same subject? Am I repeating someone else's work? Is this a new insight that no one else has had, but has foundations that are authentic or legitimate or objectively true? Am I making a false assumption? Am I making an assumption that someone else has already shown to be false? All of this goes on the frontier of science. Let me make it clear that I'm delighted when I see people with active minds trying to tackle the great unknowns in the universe. It's a beautiful thing that people want to participate on this frontier. What can happen is, if you're a fan of a subject, let's say, a hobbyist, let's call it, it's possible to know enough about that subject to think you're right, but not enough about that subject to know that you're wrong. Means you spend all this time. It doesn't happen overnight. You can't just sit in an armchair and say, I'm now an expert. It requires years and years of study, especially looking through journals where new ideas are published and contested. That's what we have learned is the most effective means of establishing that which is objectively true, or determining that which is objectively false. Both of those work hand in hand to move the needle on our understanding of the universe. It opens with a quote from Terrance. "It can never occur that the square root of a given number, when added to itself, is greater than the initial number squared, for that would expose a loose thread within the fabric of our understanding, a loose thread capable of unraveling the very ground rules of mathematics."
Because I asked him, I said, under what conditions? I said, it's illogical where the square root of a number added to itself will equal more than that number squared. But that's what happens with the square root of 2. That's what happens with most of the numbers. I was like, how is it that multiplication, if it means to make more and increase a number, how is 1 times 1 equaling 1 part of the multiplication table? Now, I understand that if you're seeing it one time,
Right.
but we call that once. But the moment that you add the times in there, that multiplicative indicator, that means there's more than 1. So now each equation is supposed to be balanced. That equal sign is supposed to show that there's a balance between these 2 numbers over here and a balance on this one over here. What happened to the other one in this equation? It didn't equate.
That's a bold statement. So then I just say, this opening thesis is false. There are plenty of examples of this that have escaped your attention. His statement is shown to be false for every number that's less than 1 and greater than 0. For example, the square root of 0.64 is 0.8. 0.8 is bigger than 0.64, and it's a larger number than the original. And 0.64 squared equals 0.4096, a smaller number than the original. To the extent that the next 35 pages depends on your stated thesis, this fact undermines your claims and assumptions and conclusions. It's not about feelings here. It's about objective reality. So at the time, I considered Terrance a strong acquaintance. Then we hung out a bit and had much exchange. We haven't spoken much since then. But go to page 2, and in here, he mentions people who he declares were persecuted because their vision exceeded the myopic view of their contemporaries. And he mentions Walter Russell, Nikola Tesla, John Keeley, and many, many more.
Walter Russell and Victor Schauberger and John Keeley and Tesla as the people that I looked up to. Mm-hmm. He attacked them.
Regarding your list of people who have made brave sacrifices, I note that to be a genius is to be misunderstood, but to be misunderstood is not to be a genius. The work of Walter Russell, has eluded any experimental support, and the work of Keeley is generally not reproducible. Science is about reproducibility. I can have the most brilliant, crazy, fun idea ever, and if I perform an experiment and no one else can duplicate that experiment, it belongs in the trash heap. It's me in my own world, thinking I have landed on an objective truth, when in fact I haven't. That's how science works, the reproducibility of results. As for the work of Tesla, much of it had very real value to physics and our understanding of electromagnetism. And that value is duly recognized by my community in the naming of a unit of electromagnetism after him. You can't get more badass than having a unit named after you. Newton has a unit named after him. For example, the metric unit of force is a Newton. Much of the rest of his work was fringe and unrealized, either for violating known laws of physics or for being simply impractical. Just because you do some good stuff doesn't mean everything you ever did is going to be great.
He was like, well, Tesla stuff worked, but Tesla was never really respected and out there. And I guess he wanted me to support Bohr or Schringer or Feynman or any of those people. And I'm looking at the Feynman diagrams. I'm like, you made all these things up. You're basically doing the Mr. Spock thing. If you want to find the answer to something, then you cancel out all the possibilities all other possibilities and you root it down to one thing. So that means going through the whole universe to answer one question.
So I think on Rogan, Terrance said that I trashed those three researchers when I'm just simply stating the fact. I don't think of that as trashing. I think of that as being honest. I mean, I could have softened it, but I don't think that's what people who care about you should do. People who care will be honest with you about ideas, about thoughts. If we place a candle in front of a mirror, the measurement of light is doubled, is it not? It does not measure as only one light source. We actually see two lights. A light meter will show twice the intensity of light. This is false. Maybe that's too blunt. What else should I say? I'm a scientist. That's what I would tell a colleague who then say, would thank you, and then we go out for a beer after, because that's how that works. And there's an old saying, I first heard it from Michael Dell of Dell Technologies. If one day you find yourself the smartest person in the room, change rooms. I will note that from this work, Terrance produces art, sculptural art, which I find to be intriguing, even beautiful. To me, more intriguing than beautiful, because you got to look at it and you keep looking at it, like, what is that? And what's going on there? I just want to read you my ending comments here. I could not follow the reasoning on these last few pages, but the illustrations that derive from them are beautiful, regardless of how they were derived. My notes have been strongly critical of your reasoning and conclusions. I was candid and blunt out of respect for the energy you have clearly invested in this work. But if you're sure that you are still right and that I have completely misunderstood your thesis, then you will need to look for another person to evaluate what you have done and solicit their comments. In any case, like I say above, the images and illustrations in your final pages are beautiful works of art, unlike any I have seen. Best to you, Neil.
When he wrote his response to my paper, and he said, if you have any other questions, you're going to have to see somebody else, and he wouldn't take my calls anymore. I was like, okay, so I wrote the book based off of those responses, and I reached out to another guy, Dr. David Tong. Reason I wanted to talk to him was because of his show, The Cosmos, that he was doing after that incredible guy, Carl Sagan did. The very first episode he had was talking about Giordano Bruno. And he said that Giordano Bruno was looking for that grand unified field equation, and maybe one day somebody is going to do it. And when they do it, it's going to change the world. And I'm like, dude, I've done it. I've got it here. He attacked it with such vitriol that I was like, oh, okay, maybe I need to walk away from this. Dr. David Tong from Cambridge, a professor at Cambridge, did a video on physics of the world, and he said it's all a lie. And he explained that there was these 16 fields, that everything that they had taught was this, and they gave the best understanding and interpretation that they had of it.
So, in case people wanted to know what actually went down 8 years ago, just always be cautious of the Dunning-Kruger effect. You put in a little bit of work and you have an idea, and then you think your idea is right, and that Einstein is wrong and Newton is wrong and that everybody's wrong and that all of modern astrophysicists are wrong. That's bold. That's bold. Audacious. Bodacious. When continental drift was proposed, it was like, what? Land masses are moving on Earth's surface? That's a weird idea. That's going to be a hard sell. We think there's sort of upswelling of yes, locally, but whole continents, that's crazy. It would take a few decades until ultimately, when we're mapping the bottom of the ocean, we find that there's a mid-Atlantic ridge that the ridges are separating. It's like bada bing. So the resistance to jumping on the idea that continents move was not because people were stubborn. It was because people are cautious. Any new idea needs to be put through the ringer. That's how science works. You put it through the ringer. Every possible test you can, not just because it happens to look like South America fits with Africa. Any better evidence than that? Oh, wait a minute. Fossils matched between the west coast of South America and the east coast of Africa. Not recent fossils, fossils from millions of years ago. That's interesting. at the vibrant energy that goes on at conferences and the contest of ideas. That's how we roll. That's how it works. When Einstein came out with relativity, saying space-time curves, Al, what are you saying? What are you doing? Well, you can test it with a total solar eclipse. So the idea comes out in 1915, is published in 1916, 1919. We measured light around the edge of during a total solar eclipse, because you can't see the stars during the daytime. You see the light rays bent from their actual coordinate positions on the sky. Sir Arthur Eddington, an astrophysicist, provided the first experimental evidence for Einstein's general theory of relativity, which, by the way, was published in a peer-reviewed journal. Crazy idea. The platform to be accepted for the ideas is not social media. It is not Joe Rogan. It is not my podcast. It is research journals where attention can be given on a level that at the end of the day offers no higher respect for your energy and intellect than by declaring that what's in it is either right or wrong or worthy of publication or not. This was the future in 1988, right? This is drawn in the 1950s and 60s, thinking about the 1960s, thinking about the 1980s. Let's take a close look at what's going on in America. I think we have fear of numbers. For example, okay, here goes one. Maybe it's not fear, maybe it's ignorance of numbers. Science illiteracy is rampant in our culture. I'm not telling. I've changed my views 360. If you don't remember what 360 degrees is, it is that, okay?
Even our Congress, the supposed pinnacle of leadership and intellect, often leaves much to be desired. So, when we see something as basic as a fear of numbers persisting, it's hard not to feel a tad disappointed, to say the least.
Now, I wonder, maybe the congressperson did do that. Exactly. Maybe they're just trying to fool you. Maybe they're trying to make you think they changed their mind, but they did not. Okay? I'd have more respect for them lying with correct math. Okay? But I'm pretty sure he was telling the truth with math ignorance. Half the schools in the district are below average. You know, that's kind of what an average sort of is, right?
It really makes you think about how the worst-case scenario for students suddenly became our average performance.
About half below. That's kind of what, not exactly maybe, but pretty much so. Technically, that would be, what would that be? The median, technically, but still. What the journalist probably meant to say was half the schools are below standards or below grade level. They said below average, which meant they were mathematically illiterate. If that were actually true, something would be wrong with the state of mathematics.
But is mathematics actually wrong and outdated? Or that we failed to create a curriculum that would make kids smarter? Think about it. In the time of our great philosophers, they barely have any materials or past resources to learn about these things. They've derived these laws and computation through everyday living. Now, math, as well as other subjects, has become so detached from reality and everyday living that kids and even adults didn't feel like it's necessary to know about it.
Here's one, a little more subtle. 80% of airplane crash survivors had studied the locations of the exit doors on takeoff. So you say, well, I'm going to study where the exit doors are because I want to be in that 80%. That's a good percentage to be in, isn't it? That's good.
It makes you wonder, is it just a mere problem in the wordplay? Is it the lack of space in a broadsheet? Is it the inability of the writer to misunderstand the statistics presented? Is it a problem in the data collection? Because these are not isolated cases. Math mishaps happen quite often. and often in places, events, and times where it shouldn't be in.
So, but think about this. Wait, what's so funny? So think about, so here, let me just posit a question to you. Suppose 100% of the people study the locations of the exit doors on takeoff. You would never know because they're, all right? So this statistic is basically meaningless to act upon. That's all I'm saying. I'm just saying. This one, you get this a lot. The state lottery is a tax on the poor. We've heard this because poor people spend a disproportionate fraction of their income on state lotteries. Does Washington have a state lottery? Every state has. But really, I don't think of it this way. I think of it as the state lottery is a tax on all those people who never did well in their math class. That's how I think about it. How about buildings? You go into buildings. 80% of all buildings are missing a 13th floor. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14, 15, 16. I feel like going into all these elevators with a Sharpie, crossing out the floor, putting it, and say, that's the 13th floor. You're not fooling anybody. This is 21st century America. We have people afraid of the number 13. And what happens when you get to lobby and then you go to floors below the lobby? What do they call them? B for basement, SB, sub SBB. Can I buy a vowel, please? Like, what are you doing there? We have perfectly good nomenclature for going below the lobby level. They're called negative numbers, okay? We know how to do this. It is well understood. But of course, this is America. There is a place in the world that has negative numbers. Oh, it's in Germany. Oh my gosh. Oh, by the way, is this a science museum? No, it's a history museum. Germany. That's a closer look in case you missed it. Okay?
Neil deGrasse Tyson doesn't stop at numeracy. He asserts that Americans also suffer from widespread scientific misconceptions. He uses examples of misunderstood physics principles like gravity and thermodynamics to illustrate this point.
There's also bad physics, all right? Now, this illustration requires an explanation. This is an ad for Holiday Inn. Now, admittedly, this is Holiday Inn England rather than Holiday Inn America, but Holiday Inn is an American company. Now, this is an ad for a new marketing plan where you can have what they're calling bed warmers pre-warm your bed for you before you go to sleep at night. Okay, so the people on either side are the bed warmers. Now, of course, he's looking at her and not him. Just interesting fact there. But this is a thermodynamically pointless exercise because the only way you're going to get the body heat from those two people is if they are in your bed. But for reasons of sanitation, they are not only fully clothed, they are fully insulated. If you're insulated, your heat is not coming out. It stays within all of your clothing. This one time we met in Las Vegas, but this is what happened here. Vegas asked them never to return to the city.
Neil deGrasse Tyson doesn't shy away from engineering blunders. He exposes how seemingly basic infrastructure problems like faulty bridges and collapsing railways plague even the United States.
We're talking about America, people. Bad engineering. You know, what is this? Okay, levees broke in New Orleans, 2005. You know, if you read accounts of this, they say, oh, Katrina came in and Hurricane Katrina, bad hurricane. Excuse me, wait, pause, back up. Do you know Katrina was category 5 in the Gulf? On landfall, it was category 3. It had already passed over New Orleans. People were sweeping up some of the broken branches in the street. Then the levees broke. The city survived the hurricane just fine. What it is they didn't survive was faulty engineering. That was the problem in 2005. And I submit to you that you look at these images and people hoping to get rescued from their rooftops, and you ask yourself, what country is this? Some of us who are old enough, we used to see film loops of third world countries where you see an absence of infrastructure, people towing, their belongings with an ox through mud. And you say, oh, that's the third world. We live in America. What country is this? The middle of Manhattan, a steam pipe. People, steam? Don't we know how to move steam from one place to another? Wait a minute, we're actually still using steam? Wait, what? Okay. I'm not going far back in time to get these stories. Bridge collapses. I-35, Minnesota. A bridge collapsed?
Now, this isn't just a lack of intelligence. The computation for a sturdy bridge is readily available and accessible. In these scenarios, what often happens is a lack of budget due to corruption.
You go through Europe, there's still bridges standing from the Roman Empire. We can't put a bridge over that, all right? That's not a river, this is a brook, all right? What country is this? Let's go to Los Angeles. Trains collide. People get hurt. Some people, you think we would have figured this one out. A train comes this way, you don't send another train the opposite direction on the same track. That would be like commandment number 1.
Commandment number 1 means nothing to Corruption 101. Make substandard roads, railways, highways, and bridges so we could redo them and get another kickback.
All right, railroads 101. A crane collapsed. Back in New York, a crane collapsed. What, you can't hold up a crane? What country is this? Hurricanes come. We say, run! Now, here's what's interesting. I think these people already know about this, okay? So, this is useless information to all these people. Now, here's what happens. If you don't have scientists and engineers in your midst, when a hurricane comes or some kind of a natural disaster, your first thought is stockpile food and run. But if you're an engineer or a scientist and the disaster's coming, you say, how can I avert that disaster? I foresee a day where a hurricane forms in the Gulf. You put in some kind of apparatus that taps the energy of that hurricane, and that energy drives the electricity of the city that would otherwise be destroyed by the hurricane had it continued to go through. That's the kind of thinking that needs to go on in this world. What country is this? I'm not going far back in time here.
Neil deGrasse Tyson dives into the heart of scientific illiteracy. Buckle up as he tackles everything from widespread disbelief in evolution to doomsday predictions and alien abduction stories. This exposes some truly bizarre scientific misconceptions plaguing American society, raising the question, how can we bridge the gap between fact and fiction?
This is, yesterday's news. What country are we living in? There's more what's going on. Profound science illiteracy in this country. Here's a book that I read before I came here. I read it in its entirety. I heeded its advice. I wanted to make sure I showed up for you this evening. So someone has to write this book An editor says, hey, that's a good idea for a book. A publisher publishes it, they put it on the shelf, and then people buy it. How about this one? I just one. How to Survive 2012. Tactics and survival places for the coming pole shift. Pole shift? Where'd they get that from? Pole? The end of the world? In there is the Mayan calendar, because clearly the Mayans knew more about astrophysics than any of us do today. Clearly. And wait a minute. Next Saturday. Whoa, next Saturday. Whoa. What country is this? What millennium is this? So what's interesting is originally they said the world was going to end May 21st, but then it was revised, and so apparently the 21st is only Judgment Day. So Jesus is coming on the 21st, and I'm guessing that he's really pissed, okay? So, at human beings. So 5 months later is the asserted end of the world, as evidenced right here, the end of the world, and there's not much sand left in that clock. You can translate this into any language area on a globe, which means it's a normal map. Okay, so what we're about to do is morph the area of each country according to how much peer-reviewed science research is conducted in that country. Okay, let's do that. So this is a measure of who's doing the most science in the world. Some countries will shrink relative to that area you see here. Others will expand depending on how active they are in science. So let's check out what happens when we do this. Well, the United States is sitting fat and pretty there, I'd say. That's America, yeah. Yeah, okay. Wait, what's that big purple region away? Whoa, what was that? What's that purple? Whoa. What country is that? Japan, kicking major science butt on the map right there. One of the great tragedies is Africa shrinking to nothing in area on this chart. Compared with the area it actually occupies in the world, that is a modern day tragedy right there, given the natural resources that are prevalent within it. Europe is huge. They split formerly Eastern Europe, that's in blue, from Western Europe, that's in those shades of pink. So, and there you have Brazil, that's the aerospace industry kicking in there. All right, so you look at this, you say, hey, we're doing pretty good. Tyson, what are you complaining about? Okay? This is the wrong map. What you want to look at is not how much science is going on, no. You want to look at the change in how much science is going on. From the year 2000 to 2010. That's the trend line. That is the future of the world. Compare the difference in published research papers in all sciences between 2000 and 2010. And you get this. Europe is even bigger. Japan is even bigger. China is huge. Africa is even smaller. This is the changing landscape of the world. As everyone else understands the value of innovative investments in science and technology in ways that we do not, we slowly fade. This is the fading that worried me when Russia says, oh, you guys want to join us for a mission that will save your West Coast? You say, well, sure, we got our space program. We lead the world in space. How about space? We've got some faulty memory going on. One of them is that we're space pioneers. That's a faulty memory. Okay, Yuri Gagarin was launched into orbit 50 years ago, April 12th, okay? We all know that. Did you know, however, that he, and I tweeted this, by the way, he was the fourth mammal to achieve this feat after dogs, guinea pig, and mice. Then we sent a human, they're all Russian, a Russian dog, Laika, guinea pig and mice, then Yuri Gagarin. So let's look at the full list. Dogs, in order, dogs, guinea pigs, mice, Russian human, chimpanzee, American human. Does that sound like we're pioneers here? We come behind Russian mice. The Russians did all this first. They came up with the rocket formula, for goodness sake. This is the formula that tells you that most of the fuel in your rocket that's yet to be burned requires fuel to lift it to a place so that you can later on burn it. That's why the Saturn V rocket, 32 stories tall, the astronauts are in the up a little bitty bit, and all the rest is a basically, all right? First satellite, first animal, first human, first woman, first black person in space, first to land on the moon with the robots, first lunar rover. They photographed the far side of the moon, Earthrise from the moon, Venus, Mars, spacewalk. Now we have a few firsts, we have a couple. First space docking, first to land on the moon. We crossed the asteroid belt first to achieve hyperbolic velocity that escapes the solar system. Okay, but still, this is hardly what you would call pioneering behavior.